So we're going to be talking about the Mattachine Society, which many consider to be one of the first, if not the first, gay activist group, and its founder, Harry Hay, who many consider to be the father of gay liberation in America, and a landmark case that helped pave the way for gay civil rights. Born Henry Hay Jr. in Sussex, England in April of 1912.
His dad was Henry Hello.
His mom was Anita Aloha.
His sister, Sally Sia.
Sally Salutations. Sally was short for salutations. As a young child, the Hay family moved to California. I couldn't figure out where particularly, but he ends up in Los Angeles eventually. He attended Stanford for a bit, but by early 1932 had to drop out due to quote-unquote health reasons. I never figured out what that was. And then he started pursuing theater acting. While acting, he met another actor, Will Geer, and the two started a relationship. Will Geer, if you're curious, played the grandfather on The Waltons, the show I'd never watched.
I've never watched it either, but I was positive there wasn't a grandfather on that show.
I know The Waltons is something to say of a certain era when you're trying to be like, I guess it eventually became like, well, we're not the Cosbys. I think of another era. Well, we're not the Waltons. Okay, what do you want?
So it was the well-off family who got along at the end
I think
of the
actually
day.
they're a farm family, but they love each other, and that's
It's a
enough.
successful farm, though. A really successful farm. A doctor farm.
Yeah, we're out here growing medicine.
They have a lawyer creamery. That's why they call it Big Pharma. They're growing just like Advil and Vicodin.
There's a bunch of gopher hoes, but it's men trying to get Viagra. Get out of here, scatter!
Yeah, they're popping out of the ground. They wish.
They're popping out of the ground 4 hours at a time. Geer got Hay to join the Communist Party after Harry discovered Marxism, and then together they formed an...
What year was this?
This was mid-30s, I suppose.
God. So he's openly gay?
No.
Okay. Is he gay? I didn't even
Harry
think
Hay
to ask.
is gay.
Okay.
Harry Hay is gay. He's
It rhymes. He has to be.
Yeah, according to schoolyards, it has to be.
Yeah, according to his bullies. Okay, so that's pretty crazy to one in the 30s be openly gay and also...
Not openly gay.
Okay, but then to be openly a communist, unless he's not openly a communist.
Also not... Well,
All right.
Okay.
He's living the normal life of a gay communist.
I think
in
he
the
was
30s.
more scared of people finding out that he was gay than he was a communist. In the 30s anyways. I don't really know. I know it's not the 50s yet, and the 50s is where you really can't
When
be a
he would
commie.
get pulled in by the police, they would have to feel each other out to see what each other
So
knew.
what were you doing at that bookstore? What did you see me doing at the bookstore?
Which bookstore? That's
Yeah.
pretty scary. I would to be keeping both of those things a secret at
It's a
that time.
Russian doll inside of a turducken.
Yeah, it's not a turducken. It's
What is
not
it?
a donut. A turducken. It's not a
Oh,
turkey.
no, you dunk it.
It's not a duck inside of a turkey inside of a Dunkin' Donuts.
Why wouldn't it be?
Because it's a duck.
Who eats ducks? Why would I eat a duck? I eat donuts. Daniel, wake up. So together, they're both communists after Harry Hay found Marxism, and together they performed, is it Agitprop? Agitprop?
Prop comedy? Agitprop comedy?
Agitprop comedy.
Agitprop,
Agitprop
yeah.
street theater, protesting everything from Jim Crow laws, anti-Semitism, while also using their performances to shine a light on workers' rights to unionize. So they were
These guys are...
they're ahead of their time.
They are not well liked in their time. In their
Kind of
day.
heavy-handed, but also they're doing a lot of really punk stuff in the 30s. What drew Harry Hay to Marxism was the assumption that it would allow homosexuality under its principles. The Communist Party, CPA USA, actually forbade gay and lesbian activities, so kind of never mind, but he still joined. But now, like we were talking about, two secrets. But Harry still appreciated the progressive ideals of Marxism. That in itself was not popular back in the day, so you can listen back to our Hollywood Blacklist episode, Red is the New Black, to hear all the anti-communist stories in LA.
Red is the New Black list, Greg.
Oh, that's what it was, wasn't it?
If you're going to be quoting puns that we've made in the past, show a little respect.
Now that I look at it, it's not as funny as I thought it was before. So there was a lot of anti-communist sentiments, but it was those sentiments that taught Harry how to guard the anonymity of his fellow commies that would be a transferable skill when it came to guarding his own progressive groups later. In 1938, he married a fellow CPUSA member, Anita Platke.
So he definitely was not openly gay.
No. And the two would go on to have 2 daughters together. He married her to ward off any suspicion in the party about his sexuality, and because a marriage counselor assured him that marriage could eclipse his homosexual urges, and for 10 years, Harry Hay lived a double life. He was married, living with kids in a nice house in Silver Lake. He was a production manager for a manufacturer. He had been an actor and a ghostwriter here and there. He had the support of his leftist progressive groups, worked on civic campaigns, attended meetings, raised funds, held meetings in his own home, but on the side of all of this was having affairs with men. Will Geer being one of them, an unnamed architect being the other, but also the Kinsey Report.
I won't say his name, but it was Frank Gehry. He likes guys whose last names sound like Gear.
I'm not going to give his whole name away, but it's Frank Lloyd and you have to figure out. You have to think about the rest.
Which one?
So he's married for 10 years, living a double life. So what changes in 1948, 10 years after all of this stuff? Well, 10 years of suppressing urges and identity is a hard time, but also the Kinsey Report came out, or as it's more professionally known, the sexual behavior in the human male by Alfred Kinsey. The research in the report looked into human sexuality, and although society looks at that report more critically now, the Kinsey Report transformed American society by challenging American perceptions and attitudes towards sex. So that was a big deal in the late 40s.
Thank you, Liam Neeson.
Thank you, Liam Neeson, for being
Kinsey.
so progressive to make that movie.
For portraying Kinsey so well, so many years
perfectly.
later.
A movie I never watched. Thank you, Liam Neeson. For Harry Hay, one detail of the report stood out, and it would push the rest of his life in a different direction. The report stated that as many as 10% of American men were homosexual. Like the big reveal.
Let me check my notes. We're what?
What? Let me read that again.
I like the dramatic page turn. It stays in the show. I know I edited a lot of things out. That will not go.
If you say Mark David Chapmango, it'll go.
Here we go with the Mark Chapmango again. It didn't work.
Maybe the greatest thing I've ever said. On the fly, audiences, like, what's he going to say?
Yeah.
I bet he's going to fumble again. No, I did not that day, sir. Harry Hay thought, well, if 10% of American men are gay, and if that's true, there would be enough gay men in the country to form a mass movement defending homosexuality against discrimination. A very good thought to have. He drafted a manifesto titled The Homosexuals in America, but his ideas weren't published until 1951.
Of course, it was a manifesto. Mr. Communist. Everything's a manifesto.
Emphasis on manifesto. So he penned this manifesto, wasn't published for like another 3 years, I think. And he also used a pseudonym to pen it, Donald Webster Corey. And
why? I mean, I understand why a pseudonym, but why that name?
That name? I feel like that's always my question. Well, but I didn't want... No, I don't care.
Well,
I would use a pseudonym too. Why'd you pick that one?
He was a big fan of Chevy Chase, so...
So after he wrote this manifesto, he proposed Bachelors Anonymous, but it never got off the ground. Quotations for that. Bachelors Anonymous.
In my story also, like, this person tries to come up with like a lot of names to try to get going, and none of them really work.
It really does. It really does hang on a good name.
Yeah.
You have to make me feel like I'm part of a cool club. The Black Hand Society. Ooh, what's that? Oh, they kill Italian people. Never mind.
The Omerta. No, not the Omerta. Omerta is what they don't say. The Cosa Nostra, which is my favorite place to visit. The beautiful Cosa Nostra of Italy.
I think I'm on a vacation at Costa Nostra.
I own a timeshare in Cosa Nostra. I don't go this time of year. A lot of bodies wash up.
But the manifesto was radical for its day, referring to homosexuals as a culturally oppressed minority, which is a term only ever used for race groups. So he was being really radical by saying, "Oh, us too," with that, and would argue with that.
Well, I can think of 90% of the country who probably.
I can think of a lot of straight people who'd be like, "No." And he was forming gay activism for civil rights before those words were a commonplace, like before gay.
This
civil
was the
rights.
40s or like
early 50s, late 40s.
Okay.
In 1950, Harry fell in love with a young dancer and fashion designer, Rudy Gernreich. Gernreich encouraged Harry to move forward with his idea of the movement and the society, and the two would be the founding members. Their early attempts at gaining members and starting discussions failed, but things picked up when Bob Hull, a man who was in Harry's music class, brought his roommate, best friend, and sometimes partner, Chuck Rowland, over. But when Bob read Harry's essay in perspective, he felt they had finally found someone who had concretely put into words what other gay men had only felt but wouldn't dare say out loud. He didn't say it out loud, he wrote it down, but you know what I mean.
Right out loud.
He wrote it, and I read it out loud, so that's kind of the same thing. Along with Chuck Rowland and Bob Hull, the men would create what many see as the first sustained gay activist group in America, the Mattachine Society, named after the medieval French term used to describe male dancers who satirize social conventions. That's a good name.
Male dancers that satirize like a jester almost?
Almost like a
dancing jester?
A dancing hot jester, probably with abs.
Greg.
But if he doesn't have abs, that's fine too. You look like whatever you want to look like. I just assume because you're a dancer, you would have abs.
He has to have abs.
He's a dancer.
Does he wear the hat? That's what I want to know.
You doing a paraquat with bells? Is it a paraquat?
I don't know what a paraquat is.
What is it that they spin on their tiptoes? Ballet dancers.
You're delving into territory that I only know from Black Swan.
The four men were also all, if not in the Communist Party, then all groups aligned with the party, because if you remember back then, communism wasn't really about communism, it was about progressive ideas. So you could be in a progressive radical group and then people like, you're a communist, and you're like, not really, and then they lay out all the stuff that the group's about. You're like, oh crap, I'm in the Communist Party.
No.
How did I do this?
I did kill Leon Trotsky. Oh no.
My name is Ethel Rosenberg. Crap. Early meetings with the four men were special just being what they were. They were four gay men discussing civil rights and social matters, Because as one paper describes it, if you were homosexual in that era, you only met other gay men in secret for sex. There wasn't a lot of chances for a big group of gay men to get together and just talk about being gay and civil rights.
That's another thing that we could cover in another episode. There was like a whole stretch of downtown. I forget what it was called, but it was like if you were gay, you knew like I could meet people here, and then like there's this area over here where it's pretty dark, no one comes by, and there's like a whole almost like a map that they would circulate amongst each other of like these are safe spots you have in this one stretch of town.
Any group that has to have safe spots. I say that, but also that's what terrorists do. Not to call gay people a terrorist, but also.
Oh my God.
I was trying to be like any group that has secret maps on how to be safe. It's probably a group that needs civil rights, and I thought. Also,
or a terrorist.
It must have been nice to just sit around and chat comfortably without having to hide anything, because even in a room full of communists hiding from G-men, you still couldn't let them know you were gay.
Right. G-men does not stand for gay man. I'm a little confused right
I bet
now.
there's a little confusion coming from certain people. The G-men are here. Oh, great. Let them in. Oh, I'm arrested. Okay. For what? Okay.
What does your G stand for?
But their level of comfort started to seep into Harry's family life. On Christmas Eve of 1950, Harry and Anita threw a party. His wife, Anita, threw a party. In attendance were several married couples and some of Harry's bachelor friends, as they were referred. It was that night that Anita started to get the feeling that Harry's true affections lied with someone else somewhere. And towards the end of the evening, someone remembers that Bob Hole made his way to the family's piano and started to play Christmas carols.
And that was the first red flag.
Yeah. Harry joined him, and as the songs were ending, Harry noticed that his wife and the married couples were on one side of the room listening, and Harry and his bachelor friends were on the other side singing. And he's like, oh, there's a clear divide in the room.
But he's just having fun with his friends.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Wait, I have to stand next to Melissa at every single party at all times? Yeah, I do, because I'm afraid of everybody else.
She's my buoy.
She's my Baba Booey.
She's my Baba Booey. The men would get together and discuss things like terminology. They wanted to do away with that sort of catty negative language that persisted at gay bars. They wanted to try to create language for the mainstream, you know? Like, I don't know what kind of terminology was socially acceptable, but I feel like even then it might not have been respectful.
Oh, sure. You think there was a single respectable term the general public had in the 50s for gay people? I mean, maybe gay people was as nice as it got.
It might have been, yeah.
There's nothing mean about saying gay people.
No, but awful people have used it in such negative ways that sometimes when you say it, you're like, oh, did I just say it?
It's like saying like, oh yeah, that guy's Mexican. He's from Mexico.
Yeah, he's from Mexico. He's on vacation from here.
If I ever have to describe someone who's from Mexico and describe them as they are Mexican, I feel awful.
Yeah, and I'm Mexican American, and even me saying it is like, don't put the emphasis on the X, put the emphasis on the M, and it sounds way different than Mexican.
Put the emphasis on the dash between Mexican and American.
Mexican with a hard M, not a hard X. The X is what sounds racist.
Mexican with a hard pride. I put the emphasis on the culture.
Harry even felt uncomfortable with the term homosexual because, like we were just saying, all the negative connotations that heterosexuals put on that word. So they suggested a new word, homophile, which sounds worse. But
that's because my next one also is like trying to come up with terms. And that's one of the things that was kind of around at the time.
Yeah, homophile, which sounds worse, but philia derives from the Latin meaning friendship, and philos comes from the Greek word meaning love. Nice sentiments, but come 2020, you got to know, we try the suffix phile for one other thing, and it's not good. So maybe lose it. How about we just use the term homosexual in a more positive life in the future? How about we just do that? Instead of using homophile, how about we just start saying homosexual with respect, and maybe it'll change. The group would add a fifth founding member, Dale Jennings. He was a little more opinionated and, as the paper put it, aggressively virile. But
aggressively virile?
That's what the LA Times said. But they accepted him.
We're back on the Viagra farm.
The five would move forward with trying to get more people in the Mattachine Society, and that was risky. Homosexual men were not well liked in everyday society in 1950. Sodomy and homosexual acts were a crime, and if you were arrested enough times, I believe they sent you away for electric shock therapy and possibly castration. So, like, coming out and being like, let's get gay men together, that was a big risk.
Yeah.
But for these guys, the thought of being shamed into a life of secrecy was a worse fate. Still, though, recruiting new members would be difficult, and they'd have to go through a whole process before being admitted. The possibility of a police raid and legal persecution.
There's a horse on a helicopter now.
He hasn't perfected it yet, but he's getting pretty good. It hasn't crashed yet.
A lasso's going to come down.
From a loudspeaker, yeehaw. Yeehaw. You two down there, yeehaw.
This is the sheriff.
Yeehaw. The possibility of a police raid and legal persecution required the meetings to be held in secret, obviously. When they invited a guest over, they had the guest meet a trusted Mattachine member in public. Then they had to be driven around for a few blocks to make sure that they didn't have a tail. And then they'd be taken to the secret meeting place. Blinds were always drawn.
When and because didn't have a tail, I don't know why, but I thought like literally a tail on them. I was like, why would that matter?
You can't keep up with 50s slang or possibly 30s slang or 40s slang. I don't know when it derives
or 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. But today, That's a bop.
That's sus. Did I use it right?
Yeah, they wanted to make sure they were not sus. Can you dig it?
There's something not jiving about that police car following me. Blinds were always drawn, and because they had read somewhere that telephones could be tapped to bug a room for surveillance, they put the phone in a drawer with a pillow over it. Just get rid of the phone. I read that. I'm like, ew, landlines?
Couldn't they shut down their rotary?
There's nothing more suspicious than like old crime movies, like a phone that's not plugged in. What is oh my God, you're going to kill me. Now it's just, I don't want anyone ever calling me ever. And I'm totally normal, by the way. Their first round of potential members came when Harry and Rudy, they previously, around the time of the Korean War, when they first met, they were gathering signatures for a petition against the Korean War, and they found a secluded part of the beach between Marion Davies Estate and Malibu that was a time before surfing became a trend, occupied mostly by gay men. It was like one of those spots. So they got a lot of signatures from what they assumed were gay men at the beach. So this petition they still had, so they called a lot of those guys and other allies that signed the petition, and membership grew. The discussions were beginning to get more semi-public, as the paper cautiously puts it. The group would later be described as having a pyramid structure with discussion groups at the bottom and a small circle of founders at the top. There's a joke in there about tops and bottoms, but I won't go for it. Harry was using his knowledge of old...
Come now, Greg. That's not what we're about.
I wrote that joke for one person listening, and I hope he enjoyed it. That person, one of the most offensive people I've ever met. Anyways, Harry was using his knowledge of old Communist Party cells into a model for this new group, but the hierarchy nature was really rubbing a lot of people, like Dale Jennings, the wrong way. Me too, if you want to know. Like, fraternal orders are great, but who wants to join a civil rights group pushing for social freedom and have to, like, be an Eagle Scout for that? Like, that's dumb. Like, we'll get more on that later in the next
You can
group.
have civil rights if you bring in 5 more members.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to pay your dues before you get to be high in the group for civil rights. Anyways, around this time, Harry got a divorce from his wife, Anita, and dedicated his whole existence to serving the gay community through this group. Once he was divorced, he then had to also divorce the Communist Party since they outlawed homosexuality, which is enough reasons for me to no longer want to be a communist. But he still calls himself a Marxist anyways, which that's fine. You don't need the Communist Party backing. You could just be a Marxist.
Hang on. Let me just... Senator McCarthy?
Greg Gonzalez.
You know that new communist you're looking for?
Well, I like the idea of naming names, just simply naming names. Just calling a number, being like, Phil Spector. The first name that came to mind for some reason. I almost said Philip Marlowe. Like, don't say Philip Marlowe. Phil Spector. Crap.
The only other famous Phil.
A member named Howard Sen was the one who would suggest that they put all of the ideals of the Mattachine Society into writing. And in March of 1951, the Mattachine's missions and purposes stated the group's threefold purposes: to unify homosexuals isolated from their own kind and unable to adjust to the dominant culture, to educate and improve the woefully meager and inclusive information about homosexuality, and to lead the whole mass of, quote, social deviates to achieve the missions of unification and education. The group sought political action on a legislative basis, and they insisted on the emergence of a highly ethical homosexual culture. These men wanted to show the world they were not the perverts that American society made them think that they were, or were showing other Americans that they were. They were humans looking for the same rights as everybody else. Their big moment to show the world what they were willing to fight for comes in 1951. Dale Jennings gives Harry a call at 2 a.m. saying he had been arrested and needed $50 bail, which, keep in mind, this is Andy Griffith time. You know, Andy would tell someone, you have a $10 ticket, and they would flip out. Anyways, Harry bails him out, and they go and they have breakfast at the Brown Derby very early in the morning, and Dale
Cobb
tells...
salad.
They shared a Cobb salad.
A breakfast Cobb.
Dale started telling Harry about the breakfast, and he was upset about a breakup, and he went and met someone at the bathroom at MacArthur Park, then called Westlake Park. But then the man in the bathroom was very sexually aggressive, and Dale just wasn't into it. But the man insisted on following him home and almost pushed his way through the door. So the guy at the door asked Dale for coffee, and Dale went to go get coffee. I wrote, why would you do that? The man started...
Unless it's hot coffee to throw in his face.
Like the Simpsons gag. I gotta boil some water to throw at you, so give me a minute. The man started moving the blinds to signal someone, and before you knew it, Dale was arrested. Straight up entrapment. Here's a side story for you, Jasper. Just, I don't know if you know this or if listeners know. I write this on a lot of postcards I sent from MacArthur Park. Across the street from Westlake Park, MacArthur Park, is the Westlake Theater, where Jim Jones of Jonestown was arrested for soliciting sex with a person who turned out to be a police officer. He went on later to lead 900 people to a suicide in Guyana. Anywho.
Side note to this whole story.
Side note to this whole thing that I thought about.
Completely related.
Whenever they call MacArthur Park Westlake Park, I'm like, oh, that's where Jim Jones got arrested.
That's why they had to change the name.
To a Donna Summer song. They named it after a Donna Summer song that came out years later. Anywho, the undercover cop pushed Dale Jennings to commit a crime, and even when Dale refused and no crime was committed, he was still arrested and fined.
Yeah.
These arrests put an emotional and financial strain on gay men, and often cops would lie about the circumstances on the stand. Some men said that they were arrested
Greg.
I have a whole thing later, so I'm not going to even dig into that yet. Some men said that they were arrested for sharing a glance, and a lot of lawyers would not go near a case like this because it was the cop's word versus the word of a gay man. And if you think it's hard now to get a cop to face consequences, in 1950s Los Angeles, every cop was Jesus Christ walking on earth. Good luck, Mr. Lawyer, trying to convince a jury that Jesus Christ is lying. Oh, and by the way,
hey, they did it once.
Men convicted of homosexual acts would have to pay fines, and you'd have to pay any fine so long as it meant not serving time in prison, because in prison they would be singled out by other inmates.
Yeah. And by prison guards.
And by prison guards. Like you were literally locked up with people who were going to brutalize you in every way. But listening to Dale Jennings in the morning at Brown Derby in 1951, Harry Hayes saw it all in a flash and knew that this case would be the one where they would challenge the establishment and show everyone that being gay is not a crime. People close to the founding members had formed the Mattachine Foundation because as heterosexual loved ones, they would be the ones who would provide secure and legal aid for fundraising and publicity. Like they got their family members to set up this foundation for legal representation because as a gay person, you couldn't do that, I guess, on your own. They secured the legal aid of George Shilby, an Arab American from Long Beach, who we may have mentioned in previous episodes. He was a brilliant trial lawyer and political firebrand. He defended some of the young men in Sleepy Lagoon trial and was defending... You might have brought him up for this. He defended Sirhan despite being a Kennedy supporter. The Mattachine Foundation then created the Citizens Committee to Outlaw Entrapment to raise funds for the defense and command public awareness through a series of flyers addressed to the citizens of Los Angeles that were taken to gay beach areas, bus stops, selected men rooms, which feels like a punchline, but it's really not. They printed pamphlets that pose the question, are you left-handed? Comparing being homosexual to any other inborn trait. Someone needs to tell Harry Hay that left-handed people were also thought to be witches at some point, so maybe back up a little bit, but that's fine.
Don't affiliate with another group that crazy people look down on.
Yeah, but like I like that idea of like there's like nothing hideous about me. Like some people are just left-handed, doesn't make them. That's not a wrong.
It's no more
right
hideous than being left-handed.
Get them! But their charge to gain awareness was working, and it was radical at the time. With one case to focus on, the group held more frequent meetings, worked on major campaigns to get attention and get their point across, and sought more avenues to secure finances. Then that really that seems to be the real drive is like we all have one case to center on as opposed to like we have a group we want civil rights for our group, but you don't, it's kind of like a machine gun blast where it just goes everywhere. But if you have like one sniper shot and one thing, it would probably hit the target. Yeah, I go to Dick's Sporting Goods.
I played Call of Duty. I get it. I get war.
They had raffles to see Jack Dye dance.
What?
His name is Jack Dye.
Okay.
D-Y-E. He was a dancer.
We went to see Jack Dye Dance or Die.
God.
Burbank. They put all of their budget
This
into
is what living in
helicopters.
Burbank? Like, it sucks. There's horses and planes everywhere.
It's a police state. Everybody in Burbank is a cop.
Like, we joke? Are they?
You're either a cop or you work for Disney.
The cop of the industry is working for Disney.
The Hollywood cop.
Yeah, the Hollywood cop. The namer of names. There's a dancer named Jack Dye. They had raffles to see him dance at his secluded canyon estate on the coast. Lester Horton, the city's premier dancer and choreographer, offered an evening's take on his newest show. Harry Hay says that Lester Horton should be credited with holding the first fundraiser for gay civil rights. Like a big show that he held. And all that money went to this case, basically.
Yeah.
He's saying that this man should be credited with that. Lester Horton. Good job, Lester Horton.
Lester Horton. Isn't that an animator or something?
No.
Oh.
You might be thinking of Horton Hatches the Egg.
I think I might be.
One of the best Dr. Seuss books. Very few racial stereotypes in that one. He's not Charles Adams. Come on. Dale Jennings' trial begins on June 23rd, 1952, and Shilby made a powerful opening statement in which he pointed out that homosexuality and lasciviousness are not identical after stating that his client was admittedly homosexual, that no fine line separates the variations of sexual inclinations, and the only one true pervert in the courtroom was the arresting officer.
I think it's lasciviousness.
Is it lasciviousness?
Yeah, not lasciviousness. That's my French drag name.
I put an H in this word when I was spelling it, just so you know. He asked the jury to feel no prejudice merely because Jennings had been arrested. At the center of the case was a plea for humanity. Look at us as human beings. Like we're, like I was arrested because I'm gay, but I did nothing wrong. There's no crime here, and being gay is not a crime. The jury deliberated for...
Another dramatic pause.
For 40 hours. And they even asked one of the members to be dismissed when he stated that he would hold out for guilty till hell froze over. The rest voted straight acquittal, and the judge dismissed
Wait a minute.
the charges.
Straight acquittal?
Like acquittal. Like no...
So not like... It should be a gay acquittal.
Imagine that was on the... We were like a straight acquittal. Hey, wait a minute.
Actually, Your Honor, we thought we'd have a little fun this time. I know that there's accepted terminology, but wait a minute. Why is this park suddenly filled with a bunch of teenagers? Is this where like the high school comes to have lunch in a park off campus? Or what goes on in Burbank?
I don't know, but it seems really nice. In Parks and Recs, they do have an Eagleton episode where they talk about like, this is the entrance to Eagleton, and it looks like Burbank right now. And then like, this is the entrance to Pawnee, and it's literally the other side of the freeway entrance of my high school. It's like 20 feet from my high school. And like, we would walk past that point to get to the Jack in the Box where the bushes are filled with rats. Just being in this park right now, you asking that question, I'm like, is this where they came to have lunch? I'm like, I went to a Jack in the Box filled with rats on my break because I grew up in Pawnee.
This is what you could have had if your mom and dad bought that horse
house. That house with the ranch. When I read about what the jury had done, I had to make sure the dates were right. Like 1952, not like 1992 or like 2002, like
2022 maybe.
2022. I don't understand. Like, you were a jury in the straightest time in America, and someone was like, I want to make sure this guy's guilty, and people stood up for them like crazy in a way that I'm so proud of this jury. Good for them for not being assholes about it.
Except for one of them.
Except for the one guy who they had to dismiss. That was the first time in California history that an admitted homosexual was freed on a vagrancy lewdness charge, which they called, what did they call it? It was like vag-lew, like a vag-lew case. I'm like, what is this? And it was vagrancy and lewdness charge. It was put so gross.
I thought that was the Lucy and Desi's production company.
Other cases were successfully fought around the same time, but Jennings' case was special because it was an effort by a group fighting for civil rights when it was done. Hooray, right? Big deal. Wait, I
sounded sarcastic, but okay.
Yeah, hooray. That is really authentically a big deal.
Let me recalibrate my emotionometer.
Oh, I did mean it that way. Hooray, right? Big deal. It was still 1952, sadly, and when the Mattachine Society went and informed every newspaper and radio station, no one bothered to broadcast this news or celebrate it in any way. The fight for gay rights had just started, but it also had just started.
It's when, like, reading these things that happened in, like, the 50s and the 70s or whatever, you're like, boy, you have so much more to go.
I know, it's really sad. Like, I'm proud of them. Like, they did it. They stood the ground. They fought in court. They got what they needed. They're beginning to get their civil rights, but they're beginning to get their civil rights.
And they're still pretty much beginning to get civil rights.
The Mattachine Society laid some of the most essential groundwork for the gay rights movement that would be decades in the making. By 1953, the group would have thousands of members through the whole U.S., and they would begin publishing one magazine, which was their first widely distributed journal for homosexuals. Harry Hay was later ousted from the group over complicated power struggles and formed some new groups through the 60s and 70s. One of them we'll kind of get back to. He was kind of a controversial figure, and it's important to separate the man from the historical figure. In one article, he straight up uses the N-word, but in that, like, New York beatnik way, where it's like, it's not a racial slur, but stop saying it. There's never an excuse to say it, even when you're trying to be kind of beatnik about it. Please don't say it. He also thought in really reductive ways. He would say stuff like, no gay men are competitive, and I'm not gay, but I don't like stereotypes, positive or negative in any nature. I've seen enough RuPaul's Drag Race to know to at least argue a point in that case that no gay men are competitive. But also, like, he's saying all straight men are competitive. There are no gay competitive men, but all straight men are competitive. And, like, kind of, but that's what men say about women, and we, like, it's also not true that
men say that women aren't competitive.
Women are all in competition with each other. That's what men's right people, MRA people will say, that all women are in competition with each other, and we all look at that and we're like, that's gross. Same can be said, like, no, all straight men are in competition with each other, or in competition, or competitive.
Well, I am, but
I bet my segment's better than yours. But, like, I just don't like those reductive ways, and he, like, is hard stance on those reductive sort of, like, all straight men, all gay men.
Well, look, this is the thing of looking back at any progressive figure from the past is, like, progressive for the time. Like, I heard, like, you ripped the sheet off of the issue, but then underneath that sheet
is a person from the 50s.
There, surprise! It's Nosferatu. There's so many other, like, wrinkles and things that were covered up that you didn't even realize were covered up because you were trying to uncover this other thing and not realizing you were still perpetuating other things that were a problem.
Yeah, that's definitely what this guy, what Harry Hay,
all of these people that were
every person we've talked about,
every single person,
somebody's
was
telling
part
me
of the problem.
Somebody is telling me that Cesar Chavez was problematic. I'm like, Cesar Chavez, and they went on, I'm like, oh wow,
sure.
That guy's on murals. In the 80s, Harry Hay co-founded a group called the Radical Fairies, a gay spiritual group that had, like, woodsy retreats. The man he co-founded it with, John Bernstein, was his partner, and the two were together since they met until the end of his life. Harry Hay passed in 2002, leaving behind a legacy of civil rights work.
But so you didn't explicitly say where this whole
I'm sorry.
Because that's like a site now.
Yeah, it's a site in Silver Lake, right by the Silver Lake Reservoir, 2328 Cove Avenue. One of the streets that goes by the side that faces Red Lion. You're facing Red Lion. That side has Cove Avenue. They have the Mattachine steps and also his house.
Which I would never walk up. From an exercise standpoint,
on the other side of
miserable.
the steps are the Laurel and Hardy piano steps.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's a
the
good
other side
double
of the park.
feature of steps.
Yeah.